what is this? What am I feeling? And allowing it to pass. I kind of had this realization that the less I fight, the more I win. Participation and the accountability component of it and the community, those are the three big things.
What is going on, Reboot team? Chris here with another testimonial from somebody who is coming to us from the Reboot Implementation Program. I am given the great pleasure, and I really do mean that, to be with somebody today who has been through a lot in this group, but has made tremendous strides. And in the group, we have what's called our Reboot All-Stars, and he was recently named our MVP. So it's just somebody that has just been implementing, keeping it consistent, and from what I've been seeing, just absolutely been crushing it. I am here with Daniel. How you doing today, sir?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Like I said before, thank you so much for making the time just to chat a little bit about your experience. Yeah, lots of questions, man. But first things first, I'm curious as to, from the very beginning, what led you to reaching out for help in the first place?
Yeah, so reaching out for help with the pornography just in general was that the behavior was problematic. Like I knew right away when it kind of like ventured from 5 into 6, as far as those levels go. So conscientiously, cognitively, I knew something was wrong. And I think, in my heart, I knew it was wrong too, what I was doing. Not trying to get into right or wrong of anything, but me, I was conflicted. It was against my values. And, it was like compounding problems, just kind of all culminating and just, like depressive state, negative thought patterns, irrational beliefs, and self-doubt, you name it. And, those things add up. And so I think for me, I've realized recently that I do have a growth mindset rather than like a fixed mindset. And so like, I'm really proud of myself for that. And I think I was able to harness that. But as far as like reaching out to like Porn Reboot, specifically, like that started back in October of 2021 when, um, excuse me, 2022. 2021 is when I really started being like, I'm gonna quit, and that's when I got serious about quitting. And then in 2022 is when I found one of JK's videos, and he was like listing 5 types of users, or whatever, something like that, 5 types of addicts or something along those lines. And like I was being patient, and like finally on the 5th one, I was like, that's me. You like nailed it, you know what I mean? And so I was hooked right from there. And then I found the podcast right away within a few days. And then I've just been consuming the podcast. And then about, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, like I had reached out to a strategist, and I wasn't quite ready to commit, and they were super patient about it. They understood. And then and then you get the calls, and I just wasn't ready. And then, back in, I was planning for graduating with my bachelor's degree. And I was like, that's when I'll start the program. And I was trying to prepare like 3 months in advance for that. And I spoke with David, and David was like, he hooked me. Whatever David had to say, he was like, that was the ticket. And I'm so glad that I joined. So that's how I reached out for help. And it's been quite a ride.
Dude, it absolutely has been a ride. I am curious though. You say that, 2021, 2022, you were finding out about, who JK was and the whole group and everything. I'm curious, what was the moment like where you were just like, you know what? Now's the time. Like what finally was the tipping point for you?
To join or to know that I needed something more?
That just both. Like when you
Yeah.
need something more and you kind of trusted that something more would be found in the group.
Yeah. So with the podcast, I definitely was of the mindset like, oh, I can just listen to the podcast, and like apply these things, and like I'll figure it out on my own. You know what I mean? And I think there's some merit to that mindset and attitude, because like, you want to be a doer, but at the same time, this is pretty complex what I'm dealing with, um, and the struggle, that kind of thing. So once I decided to join, like just because of the podcast and like seriously, like listening to like what JK has to say, like I really liken to JK as like the voice in the wilderness. like through all, because like I read a lot, I research a lot, and I'm trying to find like self-help and like trying to figure things out, and I just couldn't put the pieces together, and like, but everything that JK had to say in the podcast and the YouTube videos were just like, man, dude, he just knows what he's talking about. And so I had already had a lot of faith and kind of trust and confidence in the Porn Reboot system as far as just from listening to the podcast. So really, in all honesty, it was just a financial thing for me of like, I was on the fence for quite a while. And but when it comes to the investment in myself, it was a no-brainer. And so far, man, worth every penny of it. Even just the podcasts, just the material on the podcast is enough to be like, here's my donation. I mean, if that makes sense. I don't know.
So here you are in the group. You've been with us for like almost half a year now, give or take, and
4 months actually.
4 months. There you go.
Yeah.
It was longer because you've been making those many strides. But
Hit the
I
ground running though.
Dude, man, I will tell you, Daniel, I'm telling you like I know my name. I don't mean to be, over the top or whatever. Not that I'm ever dramatic. That was a joke. Basically, no, I mean it, dude. Like I've sincerely seen you. I've noticed a lightness kind of
Mm.
emerge from you. It's like something that was always there, and through time and through that kind of facilitation and structure and community and what have you, it's kind of been brought forth to the light and to the surface. And I'm curious about like what that journey or whatever has looked like for you. Let's start from the beginning. Like, what have some of the tools been that have helped you along the way?
Oh man, rubber band right off the bat. You know what I mean? That's right off the bat. At first, I was like, what is this? And no, it works. It totally does. And then I think within a couple of weeks, I had then additionally to not just using the rubber band, but then reminding myself of my reboot definition. And so it's just like how JK talks about, he's just providing levers, you know. Um, and so it's like we're basically training the unconscious mind to get in line with what we're trying to do. And so this whole like positive mindset, the doing the work, using so the tools, yeah. The rubber band, the feelings exercise, within the first week, I was like, whoa, I've been unaware all my life. Prior to this, I would have been like, I know what my emotions are, but I really didn't. I just was reacting to my emotions. And
Mhm.
so the whole thing about like emotions aren't good or bad, like, and to just be like, okay, just name them, validate them, feel them, experience, that kind of thing has been super helpful. Dialoguing has been great for, because like the rubber band works for like immediate kind of like triage assessment, but then like, okay, now I need to go into treatment. And like, that's where the dialogue comes into play. And I'm able to, because like the different sub personalities and addict selves, like whether it's, the looker or it's even going to other ends of the spectrum of like my procrastination or say like bad attitude or like the naysayer, like I can communicate with them and be like, what's going on? And I can use my rational self, my reasonable self with my irrational self, and I can kind of just have, the dialogue and figure out and just kind of problem solve in real time. So that's been helpful.
That's so good, man. I mean, I know when I first joined the group, like I always thought that, that compulsion to act out was like the entirety of me,
Yeah.
and in reality, it's just a part of our personality. And that's a huge reason why. I mean, I can talk all day about dialoguing, but just to break it down for someone that might not know what that is, long story short, yeah, like Daniel was saying, it's an opportunity to have a dialogue, to have a conversation, an open line of communication with a particular part of you that may tempt us to act out in a way that's unhealthy. But the whole point of it is to ask questions, you know, and to ask why it wants you to lure you in that sort of direction. And yeah, absolute game changer for me. And I'm glad that it's been a game changer for you because you'll realize fairly quickly, and I say this all the time, this isn't just a group for, one's PMO related compulsion. It's like, yeah, that was the initial magnet to, bring you to the group, or, that was the reason for us to reach out to ask for help. But this is self awareness 101. And what we do with that self awareness will lead us in a naturally, holistically healthier direction where, sexually compulsive behavior is deemed irrelevant and kind of, we start to look at things in a rational way. It's not shame based, where a lot of us that deal with this kind of behavior might be used to and kind of
Yeah.
conditioned to already kind of privy to, you know what I'm saying? So I love that you spoke to that. So good.
Yeah, it changes it from a conflict to a conversation, that dialogue.
Ooh, I love that. I'm gonna be stealing that. That's good. A conflict.
Uh,
Nah, it's good.
but
That's great,
but
man.
to touch on what you were talking about, the lightening up and that kind of thing, the concept of like, work with your brain rather than against it, that's been a phenomenal like cognitive component to like my reboot of keeping that in mind and at the fore. And I kind of had this realization that the less I fight, the more I win. And that's just been like a theme for me. And I think that's kind of part, just other than the all-encompassing effects of rebooting, I would say that's been a big component to how I've lightened up.
Can you expand on that a little bit? The less I fight, the more I win.
So the working with your brain rather than against it, from what I understand. So like, let's say you have an urge, and rather than white knuckling it and utilizing willpower, you are supposed to observe and sit with the urge. And so like for me, I'm like, oh man, that sounds challenging, And like, but once I started applying the tools and utilizing the feelings exercise, the checklist, and actually literally just sitting with it and being like, okay, I'm feeling this. And I'm always trying to contextualize. I'm like, why am I feeling this? But like, why isn't as important as what am I feeling? And that's one of the podcasts episodes that I have really taken to heart. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like a metaphorical like door that when you open the door, you're like, oh wow, look at all this space in here that I get to go explore. And um, and it's nourishing, like maybe it's food for the soul or the whatever the case is, whatever that what my addict was trying to achieve, that whole thing of that which satiates or not. And so anyways, yeah, so cognitively it's just like, it's just this idea of like, working with your brain rather than against it. But by utilizing these tools and these concepts, sitting with the emotion, observing the emotion, and then journaling it for sure. That's very helpful for me too. But in real time, sitting with and just being like, what is this? What am I feeling? And allowing it to pass. And yeah, so that was super helpful.
I love that, man. It's so, so good. I was just kind of like taking some notes for myself, just casually dropping diamonds. But I am curious though, like, what has been your overall experience with, say, the Facebook group?
Yeah, so first 3 minutes into the program and scrolling through the Facebook, I was like, I'm not alone. So that's a big one. The sense of community is really good. And then the relatability, like being able to read other brothers' posts and be like, oh man, I can so relate to that. Oh yeah, dude, totally. I'm not saying that I know how that feels because each person's story is unique, but there's trends amongst brothers in the struggle. And so yeah, so the sense of community, the vulnerability component of it was difficult for me at first, but then it's like, well, no, the vulnerability is just like an avenue to get to where you need to be. And there's nothing wrong with vulnerability. It's like it's super like empowering uh and I think a lot of the brothers in this struggle, like we want to share, but like man, we can't really talk to too many people about this because it's like social norms. It's kind of like, oh, it's normal, or maybe it's shunned, or maybe other folks just don't get it because like they don't have the addictive side of this. It's just like, it's whatever. They can view it or not, and they don't have that compulsivity with it. So it's kind of nice to just be in a community of people that understand, just kind of like wholeheartedly. The posting, like for me, the routine is good. The accountability is awesome. Like even like for me, like I'm a big proponent of like self accountability, but like clearly prior to joining this group, my self accountability was like nil. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I tried and I tried and I tried, but I wasn't getting anything because I wasn't utilizing tools or skills, you know? And so then you get in this program and it's like, it's the whole point is that it's a system. It's like, I don't know if it's linear per se, but it's like holistic for sure. And it's like organic, but it's like totally like, it's a system. Like you do this and then you do this and then you do this. And it's like, whoa, my mind is blown. You know, it's like super awesome realizations. And the timing is like for me, it's like it's been really cool to like it's like 2 weeks before the next module comes out, and I'm like jonesing, and I'm chomping at the bit, you know, and I'm like, I got this thing like in my mind, and not rumination, but like I'm like I'm trying to kind of tinker with this idea or this. Then the module comes out, and it's like exactly what I need, and I'm like, oh, dude, this is so perfect, you know, like the time
Yeah.
for me, anyways. I would imagine a lot of the other brothers have a similar experience, but so I take very seriously the tools and the skills and the concepts that are laid out and I'm sure all the brothers do, but like I'm thinking about this in the sense of like efficiency. I'm like I respect the time frame of how long it takes to reboot, but really in all honesty, I don't think about that. I'm like I'm here now, and that concept of today is all that we really truly have. I'm like, dude, I've heard that 100 times, but not until I joined this program have I really been able to tap into that and actually utilize it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so just each skill, each module that comes out, I take it seriously. I try to apply it as best as I can. And there's some where I'm like, ooh, maybe that's a bit much for me, or maybe that's beyond my skill level at the moment. Um, but then I try to come back to it, you know. So yeah, with the group, also just the consistency of the group. You know, there's brothers posting every day, there's videos, there's text, there's journal entries, and so there's a wide range. There's a search option to so that I can educate myself. I want to learn specifically about one thing. I can do a search, and so like all the data is there. Um, but yeah, the participation and the accountability component of it, and the community. Those are the three big things. It gives me something to do.
Yeah. I love that. So, so good. Not much to add. I love the way you shared that. So, so good. In that same spirit of that communal aspect of the program, yeah, I mean, I can completely relate as well. When you said, "Oh, wow, I'm not alone." And
Yeah.
when I joined the group, a while ago, back in my day, it was 2020, and this was even before we had like the coaching calls. It was just the group and really having that community, like you said, where in our quote unquote real life or everyday life, outside of the group, yeah, it is not easy to talk about. But let's be honest, a lot of these things, if not all of them, are not easy to talk about. It's like you said, either poo pooed or shunned, it's taboo.
Yeah.
But when you get yourself in a community of guys that get it, that legitimately understand where you're coming from, it's a game changer. But speaking of the coaching calls, what has your overall experience been like with the coaches in the group?
Oh, great. You know, I mean, so the coaches, so when I started this recent semester, I wasn't able to go to Dr. Jessica's calls, but previous to the semester, I think I went to about a month or month and a half's worth of her calls. Phenomenal, because like the other brothers ask questions and I'm like, oh yeah, I've got that question too, you know, and I'm just taking note, and and it's educational. So like I'm learning in the process. It's not just like they're not just answering the one brother's questions. I mean, they're kind of answering all the brothers' questions. The way that it's brought up is through each individual brother's questions, right? So I think I'm just trying to express the universality of the questions that we have. And then I also was attending Dr. Rankin's calls, and those were phenomenal as well. But then, due to my therapy outside of the program, that my meetings conflict with those. So from the first month, I was able to learn a lot through them. Now on Thursdays, I'm able to attend Coach Milan's calls, and those are consistent for me. So I've just been attending those, and I take note. And I've learned so much about like positive mindset, changing the way that I think about things, changing my perspective, and just like little tools of like do this. And, and it's like, I don't know. I think going to meeting after meeting after meeting with these coaching calls, you see the trends and you almost start to like know what the answer is going to be. But then he comes up with something slightly different. It's like, oh, cool. So there's still novelty and the educational component for me personally, it's not so much just about answering this question specifically, it's about the learning process. And so I'm learning a lot. I'm benefiting a lot. And then breaking the cycle, I was able to attend, I think, 13 of the 15 meetings for the first round. And so I still have the book, and I'm going to go through the book again. And the next book I need to get is What to Say to Yourself. Um, so the self-talk, yeah, that's my next book.
Absolute game changer right here.
Yeah.
That's
And then the live Q&As have been awesome, very beneficial. And then the Reboot Hero calls that they do, those have all been pretty good. So yeah.
sweet. That's great, man. I'm really, really happy to hear that. A question that I like to ask kind of goes a layer deeper, but let's just go there because why not? Basically, coming from where you've come from and learning what you have and experienced what you've experienced thus far, if you were to meet or if you know another person who you know is just struggling in silence, not really knowing where to turn with this kind of compulsive behavior, not really knowing what to do. And like I said, knowing what you know now and having experienced what you have thus far, is there anything in particular that you would want to share or tell that person?
Yeah, it's a tough question actually. I think the personality of the person and like what they had, their unique circumstances are important. So, but yeah, so if I think I would say something along the lines of it doesn't have to be this way. Um, and it depends too on like what measures have they already attempted, like maybe they've been going to 12 steps, maybe they've been going to therapy. Um, so I would say that there are professional experts that specialize in this particular addiction. And I would point them towards the Porn Reboot podcast. And then based on like through kind of like a quick Q&A with them and just an initial assessment of where they are and what they got going on, I'd be able to utilize like what I've learned from the podcast and through the group essentially of like, oh, you kind of need this skill or, oh, you kind maybe this would be helpful type deal. And then, kind of just point them in those directions, but I would definitely point them towards a Porn Reboot program.
I mean, I literally was kind of like eventually going to ask if you'd recommend the program. I think that's really,
Yes,
really
yes. Exclamation mark.
exclamation mark. Yeah, dude. I love that, dude. Sweet. Yeah, I love how, and it's a really thoughtful answer too, because, when we're having these types of conversations with somebody that's going through a hard time, we can give them kind of like a general answer or some, you know, general tool, which might not be a bad thing, but we know that, every person comes from a different set of circumstances. Everybody in this group, and, when they come into this group, they are, the cliche, but a snowflake. And the, sense that, like, we're all unique as far as our life experience up to that point, the why we decided to reach out for help at all. We have no clue what somebody's going through or where they're coming from or, you know, and what they're looking for. And maybe they don't know either what they're
Right.
particularly looking for. But the more you kind of stick around and really do this system, you'll start to eventually kind of come up with that nuanced answer for yourself. And at least on my end, maybe you can relate. Like, it's help. I mean, you were mentioning reboot definition before, kind of like your ideal end result of this process. And I had an idea when I first joined. It was like, hey, I want to be kind of done with, sexual compulsive behavior. And it's like, cool. We know what you don't want. Now, what
Right.
do you want? So, yeah, I love that you spoke to that. So, I mean, if you wanted to add to that at all.
No, I'm actually curious. So what's your phrase? What's your one word for the reboot definition?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a sense, it's become a sense of integrity.
Ah, wow,
I think that's my word. Because
cool.
I mean, it can mean a lot of things, but I want to be a type of person that says they're going to do something and then follows through. You know,
Right.
if I'm not, that kind of threatens that value of integrity. I want to be someone who's honest, who's transparent, but you know, not compromising on my principles. You know,
Right.
which has led me to making decisions that counteract that of the addict subpersonality naturally. You know, it's not about like bad, bad, bad. It's like good, good, good. you
Yeah.
know,
Right. You are what you prioritize.
that's the thing. So if my word is integrity, what would be yours? Doesn't have to be one word, but if you could kind of
Mm,
like summarize
yep.
what's your mission,
Yep. Renewal.
dude. Yeah, keep going with that.
Like right now, keep going with it.
Yeah, no, I'm curious as to that's like the headline. What's like the article?
Well, I mean, in the exercise, the definition, it's like, what's your definition? And I'm like, I have like 10 sentences, and then like later on down in the exercise, it asks like, what's your phrase or like maybe one word definition, and I said renewal. But yeah, for me, it's freedom from shame and guilt. It's eliminating, it's quitting for good. Like I'm under no uh illusion that I'm like going to be able to dabble in it later on. Like I'm like, no, man, I've been ready to part ways for a long time, and I've been trying on my own for a long time. And not until I joined this program have I had success. So
I love that. And on that note, I think that's a nice thing to cap it off with. Daniel, thank you so much for your time
yeah,
and, wish you continued success. And if you need anything, you could always reach out. You got a brother here.
cool.
And yeah, man, thank you so much for your time again.